Here we are, phase 3 of the nootropics experiment, 35 days after the Piracetam and Alpha GPC daily consumption of a total of 1 gram and 200 milligrams. So I recorded my brainwave activity using the Nexus 4 EEG BioTrace system. And in this graph, you can see the data related to the theta, alpha, SMR, and beta activity for the left and right hemisphere. Each session was 10 minutes long, and in the pre-nootropic phase, which was on the first day, my normal state was measured as well as the state during the concentration task, such as in that specific case reading a programming language book, Java language. So you can see on the left side of the table that the data related to the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, and in particular you can see there are many similarities between the normal state and the concentration task. Please note that SMR stands for sensory motor rhythm. It's not completely known or used for EEG sessions, but it has been found particularly useful in neurofeedback sessions, especially for people with learning difficulties. So, first day pre-nootropic consumption, my left hemisphere was the dominant hemisphere and still is, but the activity on the left hemisphere was somehow a little bit higher than the one on the right hemisphere. Right hemisphere is generally associated with creative tasks and arts, and also with motor sensor coordination. Left hemisphere is the logical one, usually involved during tasks such as calculation, mathematics, spatial reasoning. So you can see there are peaks on the theta frequency on both hemispheres, 10.89 and even 12.99 during the concentration task in the left hemisphere, and 8.42 and 10.19 for the right hemisphere, both for the pre-nootropics assumption period. After that, 35 days later, I measured again for 10 minutes, just in a relaxation state, so there was no learning task or particular concentration task involved in the 35 days post-nootropic assumption session. And you can see that there is a substantial difference, especially in the activity of the right hemisphere, which is quite interesting. It is somehow increased the activity of the hemisphere that was already the dominant one. Now, I am myself involved in musical activity, and which involves both music composition and performing live, playing a few different instruments. So it doesn't come as a surprise to me to have a more dominant hemisphere for the right hemisphere. But still is quite interesting to notice that the nootropics have somehow increased that activity. I don't know if it's related to the consumption of Alpha GPC or Piracetam, but it's still very interesting to notice the difference in the measurements. 41.05% of the data was omitted, was rejected on purpose because of the electrical noise and the interference of the eye movement in the recording of the brainwave activity. So, considerations. Alpha GPC, Piracetam, first 2 weeks I could definitely feel a sort of buzzing in the background, somehow similar to the one experienced by some people after drinking Red Bull. It did make me a little bit hyper, and having a psychological feel of a particularly fast speech ability, and also very, very fast linking between ideas, concepts, and visual images in my brain. It was quite interesting, the whole experience. It was somehow like having the feeling of being focused for most of the time, and also improved somehow the learning tasks, such as studying for an exam or reading a book, and being able to nail immediately abstract concepts. After 2 weeks, the whole effect kind of faded out, maybe because I started to get used to it, but also people around me started to notice that I wasn't hyper, not as hyper as, at least as the first 2 weeks during the absorption. So I guess that the antioxidant effects of the Alpha GPC helped the assumption of the Piracetam and the assimilation of the nootropic in my nervous system. So would I repeat it? Would I need it? I don't think it's, in my personal experience of, again, only 30 days, 35 days of assumption, with a total of 1,200 milligrams between the two substances. I don't think that is that necessary to use nootropics. You can get a very similar effect if you can control your sleep patterns, if you can master the right amount of sleep that you need to improve your brain power. It might be interesting to actually consume nootropics 2 or 3 days before a high demanding brain power task, for example an exam or a lecture, and then see the effects and measure in real time while performing the task if actually it's helping the brain to keep the concentration, and it's not only some kind of placebo effect. So I'll probably do an update in the near future with actual live measurement of a brain involved in an active task, for example walking in a jammed street and trying to find a place somewhere in a city where the person has never been before, with no external help, trying to do complex calculations or counting backwards, and recording the EEG activity right in the middle of the task. But in general, you can see the data on the screen, and you can make your own final considerations, just checking the numbers. And again, this was an experiment over 35 days. Hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for more.